What's up, y'all? Roll it, Kirk. What do you say we dig into some political numbers here? Last Saturday was quite the interesting political display. Liam is here, the doctor of politics here in the building here at WAFB.
Quite far from that.
Let's talk about last Saturday. Here are some of the numbers from Saturday's mayoral election. A stunning outcome by most. Even if you thought Sid Edwards had a chance to win, you probably didn't see a boat race like this. Let's talk a little bit about the numbers. The turnout was just under 36%.
Yep.
Mayor President Broome won the last runoff by 52% of the vote. Here she is behind the political newcomer by, what is that, nearly 9,000 votes. So let's talk about these numbers.
Sure. Yeah. You know, the interesting things for me, early voting was really told the story already. You know, you had Sid Edwards coming out on top in those early voting numbers. With this other category, I thought was interesting. When you had the primary election in November, these numbers, you know, obviously are dropped. You have this presidential turnout, right? But when you come into the runoff, you expect those to drop, obviously. With Republican and Democrat, that dropped by like 55%. But the other category, which is no party independents, that dropped 66%, so two-thirds.
Two-thirds, yeah.
And what we're talking about, that usually splits for Sid. And so what we're looking at in those early voting numbers, it looked like Broome was losing a lot, and Edwards was either making gains or staying where he's at, and that was telling in these numbers.
Alyssa, let's back up to November in the primaries, where you had more candidates in the race, and obviously the biggest factor in this is this gentleman right here, Ted James, who got 53,000 votes. Mayor Broome only beat him by about 5,000 votes, but she was only 6,000 votes behind Mayor President-elect Sid Edwards now. But between the two of them, they got about 113,000 votes. And that's a big thing to lean into before you get to November. This, for me, Liam, is an outcome reflective of the kind of campaign between the two top Democrats in this race. When Mayor President Broome ran for office 4 years ago and 8 years before that, the most well-known Democrat in that race was C. Denise Marcel, who was in the legislature at the time. Ted James has been out of state politics for some time, but he's a bit of a different kind of candidate. I think he was taken a bit more credibly, and the blows that he threw her way tended to land on her more.
Absolutely, and you had this, you know, tuffle of a race leading up to the primary. Following that, he endorses her. And you'd expect...
After a couple of weeks.
After a couple of weeks, yes. They said they were talking right after the election as well.
I happen to know they talked that night.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So what was interesting there, you'd expect all those Democrat voters that voted for Ted James to coalesce around Broome. That didn't really happen.
No.
That didn't really happen, what we're seeing now. And actually, what is interesting, it was really a race between races, which was interesting as well. So you had this, in the early voting numbers, Sid got 5% of the black vote. Come the runoff, he got 10%. And that's kind of on par with what is usually happening in Republican races. But it was interesting because you had this split from the Ted James vote.
The city of St. George vote turnout was 10% higher than the overall parish turnout. It was 42.7%, I believe, to 35.7%. And it's, for me, or 45.7% to 35.7%. That had a factor because their tax was on the ballot. The vote was coming out, but they were also voting to come out for Coach Sid Edwards. Democrats didn't turn out, particularly Democrats in the inner city. Some of those precincts had less than 10% turnout, and I believe that's attributable to the race between James and Broome. On that night, what did you think about these numbers and this big margin for the coach?
Yeah, again, it was really a race about Democrat losses rather than Republican gains is what we were seeing. You had the top precincts that usually went for Broome dropping in those numbers like you're talking about. However, the most common Republican holdouts stayed pretty calm and uneven, on par, which was going on in 2020 with Steve Carter for Sid Edwards. So it really was about Sid Edwards made these slight gains, but those losses on the Democrat side were very significant, and you were seeing that all throughout the runoff.
Let's go back to 2020 really quickly, Alyssa, to show where this was. This is the runoff between, this is November. This is the primary between Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. I mentioned C. Denise Marcel, who was the top Democrat in the race, and then Steve Carter. Jordan Piazza was also a candidate in that race. Let's jump to December. In December, in the runoff, you see how she performed here. I mean, this was not particularly close. But 4 years later, and I believe a lot of that had to do with Ted James and his campaign, it was about as aggressive a campaign between two Democrats as you could see.
Absolutely. And again, it was like you had this almost exact split. How much more was it on the Broome side than Ted James? Was it 55 to about 50?
Yeah, it was 58 to 53.
58 to 53.
Yeah, so.
And that just didn't coalesce. It didn't happen.
It was interesting. So we're going to be doing a lot of this in the coming months about what's happening with the races. And man, I can't wait to talk to you about next year's political cycle.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, y'all. We'll come back and talk about the city of St. George. Alyssa's giving car rides, by the way, in the back. Back with Drew Murrell, who is with the city of St. George. He is an attorney here in East Baton Rouge Parish and has been along the way with the process since just after the beginning. I don't think you were there on day one, were you?
I think I've been 6 years now.
6 years. So this past weekend was a very interesting weekend in terms of politics in the parish, but more specifically as it relates to STG. There was a tax item on the ballot. I'd like you to explain what that was because it wasn't a new tax. It was a procedural move. Is that correct?
That's correct. So once the Supreme Court determined that St. George was incorporated on April 26, 2024, the first effect was the EBR Parish Taxing Authority ceased at that moment. They could no longer collect the 2% sales tax in the St. George designated area. So what that meant is we have to have a mechanism to transfer that authority to the city of St. George. Now, in the meantime, that's what the St. George Transition District was created to do, was to be that taxing authority bridge until we had the official election to transfer that authority. And that's really all it was. It wasn't a new tax. It was simply making sure your tax dollars went from the parish and came home to the city of St. George.
Is that about $41 million?
Honestly, it's probably at this point closer to $50 million. The $48.3 million we used for litigation is a 2017 number. So 7 years later, assume that number is higher.
So you said about 48 million.
48.3.
So let's talk about that number because there's been some conversation about whether there would be some penalty on time that has gone by. Is that a thing? And if so, how does that even work?
Well, as far as a penalty, if you mean going back and recouping money from 2019 when we were officially incorporated after the election, that's all part of the negotiating process. And what's really held us up with negotiating with East Baton Rouge Parish up till now was an unwillingness to discuss what's been happening in the last since 2019. Okay. So it is an issue, but it's an issue that we can work through now with the new administration.
When do you I'm going to come to that in just a second. When do you believe you're going to receive that money?
As far as the future tax dollars that we just voted on, that becomes effective April 1st, and then around June 10th or so, sometime middle of June, we'll start seeing those tax dollars roll in that are the official tax dollars of the city of St. George.
What about the responsibility now of the interim city government to operate? Where is that? Are you still in a holding pattern until the negotiations with the city of Baton Rouge are done, or are there some services that you're providing now?
Well, it's a combination of both. So if you look at planning, zoning, and permitting, and you try to get a permit in the city of St. George recently since October, you've been dealing with the city of St. George planning, zoning, and permitting department. So those services are up now. Those fees are going to the city of St. George. If you're talking about other services, well, we have to bid those processes out. We also need money to pay for those processes. So some services we can provide now, and some services you'll see as the year goes on and the tax dollars come in, they'll transition away from EBR Parish to St. George.
I plan on having a discussion with Mayor Yates after the first of the year to kind of talk about the path going forward. Let's talk about what services you are going to be, if you can talk about it, contracting out. I mean, you're not going to have a public works department in the traditional way. You're going to contract out a lot of those services, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, part of what we saw with EBR Parish was the legacy cost, the overhead cost, and the maintenance cost of having those departments in-house compared to if you contract it out, You may even save money on the front end, but you're definitely going to save money on the back end because we're not going to have that maintenance cost. We're not going to have all those responsibilities and legacy costs. That's borne on the person providing those services.
Yeah, how do you maintain quality control? Because even if, obviously, if someone isn't doing the job, you can say, okay, this isn't working, we're going to terminate the contract and do work with someone else. But how do you maintain quality control on behalf of residents during this process?
Well, and that's been a question we've had with EBR Parish. Just a few years ago, we had over 3,000 unanswered 311 complaints involving the trash service.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's accountability. A lot of it's accountability at the local level. As a smaller city, your representative is more directly connected to you and more answerable to you. So that city council is going to be accountable for oversight and making sure these contracts are being performed. Your mayor is going to be more accountable to you for those same reasons. You're going to have a city manager in the future that's going to be managing the day-to-day operations like a professional manager would do of any company. Yeah. So you're going to have more accountability and oversight, and I think that's part of what's going to make St. George more efficient and more accountable. I
got a minute left. I know you, so I know you have thoughts on the results of this past Saturday's election. What's your thoughts about working with incoming mayor-elect Sid Edwards?
I can't be more excited to have a new voice, to have a voice that I believe is a uniter in our parish and not a divider.
Oh, man.
We've been dealing with a divider for a very long time now.
Oh, man.
When the person who sued you is the person you now have to negotiate with, that makes it a tough negotiation. It makes it, you're starting off from a bad spot. We have a fresh, clean slate moving forward with Coach Edwards, Mayor President-elect Edwards. We're very excited to start that process, and we think this is the chance for not just St. George to move forward, but the entire parish can now move forward.
Note to self, Broome and Merle won't be having Christmas dinner together anytime soon. No carbs, no carbs. All right, so we're going to talk to the mayor next month. Thank you for coming in, brother.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, up next, we'll talk about what's happening at LSU. The bowl game's on the way, and an update on the NFL season with Matt Moscona. As it relates to the show, download that WAFB app. If you haven't, you should. You can catch the show streaming on Friday morning. It airs on WAFB Plus Friday night at 7, replaying Saturday at 3 p.m. Well, against my better judgment, back on the show is Matt Moscona, the host of After Further Review. You can catch him in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and Lafayette, right?
And Lake Charles and Alexandria.
And Lake Charles and Alexandria.
And on the Clay Young Show.
And on the Clay Young Show.
Just here to boost the ratings.
That's exactly right. I hate you. Let's move on to the interview.
Got it.
So let's talk about the bowl game that's coming up here. LSU and Baylor and Texas. And what are your thoughts on getting this bowl and your thoughts about the game?
Well, bowl games now, if you're not in the playoff, are really glorified exhibitions.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of intrigue for this one, Clay. Okay. Of course, you're facing Dave Aranda. And anybody that has a tie to that 2019 national championship, there's always some it warms the cockles of your heart. But the other thing about it that
your
is
heart
significant.
Has cockles?
Subcockles as well, yes. All, right. All of our hearts have cockles.
That's right.
It is significant because LSU recruits Houston very heavily. So LSU tries to play games in Houston as much as possible. They're actually opening the 2027 season against the University of Houston at NRG Stadium. They played Wisconsin there. They were scheduled to play BYU there in 2017, but that game got moved because of Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah.
This is the third time they've been in this bowl game. So anytime LSU can get to Houston, largest alumni base outside of Louisiana,
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, it's massive. So you will have a lot of LSU fans at this game because you have a lot of LSU alums and fans in Houston that maybe don't travel to Baton Rouge, so you're bringing the product to them. So it's a win. It's a win in that sense.
The universities, obviously, when you make a bowl, and such a great point that now it is kind of like a glorified exhibition game because it doesn't count for what it used to because you've got the playoffs. But, I mean, making a bowl game is a financial win for a college.
So it's interesting how it works now. Every payout for the bowls, all the bowls that the SEC are in, all goes into the revenue sharing pot for the league, and then everything's divided equally. So it's not like it used to be, but yes, all these bowl tie-ins have a financial windfall that benefit every team in the league. But honestly, Clay, the biggest benefit of a bowl game now are the 12 extra practices. This is basically like because you have opt-outs and you have guys leaving for the draft. This is essentially like a second spring practice. Think last year. Garrett Nussmeier, who had never played, Jaden Daniels opted out. So this was a dozen practices for Garrett Nussmeier to take every rep with the ones, to lead the huddle, to go play in a game. before spring than before fall camp, before this season. So that's the real benefit, are all the guys that are going to be starting for the first time getting their opportunity before spring.
I love it, man. Yeah, before we move on to the pros, I got to ask a college question. Bill Belichick going to UNC, handed him a 400-page Bible that's got everything from staffing to budgets. He's GM's name who was with him, he's bringing back to be the GM over at North Carolina. Name escapes me, but something you didn't see coming.
For me, I thought if Belichick got back into coaching, it would have been to see, let's find the best NFL spot to keep stacking as many Super Bowls as he can. And maybe, Clay, also, one of the big things about the Belichick-Brady era in New England is when Brady left and got his Super Bowl in Tampa, part of the narrative was, does that maybe mute Belichick's influence? Right. So this would be an opportunity for Belichick to get a Super Bowl without Brady.
Yeah.
So to go to college is, I definitely didn't see this coming, especially not a place like North Carolina.
You think he was here scouting when he was in Baton Rouge a few weeks?
I know he was here doing something for NFL Film. So short story, our mutual friend Ryan Clark actually called me and said, hey, Bill's going to be in town. Can you get him set up to go? He wants to watch a high school game. Just a football junkie. He wanted to go watch a high school game the Friday night before that.
Where'd
so that's
you
take
him?
To go see the Catholic East Jeff game.
Shocker. All right, quickly.
It was the playoffs. It was
Catholic alum.
Catholic's huge,
Proud Catholic alum. Quickly, I got less than a minute. NFL season, and we'll talk about this more when we get closer to the playoffs. The Saints still have a shot to make the playoffs.
No.
But who's the...
Come on.
Stop. Well, I mean, your division sucks.
The division is atrocious, and the Saints are a bad football team. They'd have to win out. They're not going to the playoffs.
Matt Moscona, the host of After Further Review. During football season, you could catch him at Don Juan Cigar Bar with the cockles of... I'm sorry.
You got to say it right.
Say it.
Don Juan Cigar Bar.
The man with warm cockles in his heart. Let's talk about the C-Suite. Cockles free. You can catch it every Monday streaming on WAFB.com and on the WAFB app. We appreciate Matt Moscona. No, I don't. Back with three of the proud members of the Lambda Kappa Kappa chapter of Omega Sci-Fi, here to talk about what's happening with your chapter in the community. So let's talk about it, big brother. What y'all got going on?
Yeah, no, look, we appreciate you having us, Clay. So coming up next, we have our Talent Hunt program. That is a mandated program in Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated. We have 12 mandated programs. The Talent Hunt program is a program designed for high school students who have aspirations in performance arts or visual arts. We have winners throughout the country and internationally, and they will be recognized with rewards and scholarships to help them pursue their collegiate journey.
I love that. I love that. Why is this kind of thing so important to your fraternity and specifically your chapter?
So we pride ourselves on supporting the youth, right? One of our cardinal principles is uplift. And we want to be able to help the youth in our community kind of lay that foundation. And any way we can support them, we want to do that. That's why it is a mandated program for us.
What feedback do you get from the young people?
I think it's always very positive to see us doing what we do in the manner that we do it in. I think it's also something that people see the involvement in the community and how proud it makes the community when we're able to serve.
Well, Bryce, you've been involved in community things for a long time. I call him King Q because he bleeds those colors. But, you get the importance of reaching some of these young men to get them to look at their destinies because it's harder than it appears to some young men in certain parts of our community. Talk about that.
In Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity, our first cardinal principle is manhood. And so a lot of young men, unfortunately, maybe do not have their fathers in their lives. Or a father figure. So what we do is constantly find ways to reach out to these young men in our respective communities all across the country and do things that engage them but also give them an opportunity to be around men who are progressive, who are intellectual, and are always trying to better themselves and keep their aspirations high.
Is that one of the key tenets of being a member of a fraternity with the reputation of Omega Sci-Fi, is that you're reaching back into the community and touching these kids?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The majority of the things that we do throughout the year are focused on bettering this community, right? That is one of our aims.
Okay. And, I was with y'all and the entire Panhellenic Council or Panhellenic groups a couple of weeks ago, actually the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and you guys did this turkey giveaway, which was the most brilliant turkey giveaway I've seen, because you actually went and delivered the turkeys to confirm that the people getting them were in need of these turkeys. I got 30 seconds for you to tell me what that meant for y'all.
So, go ahead. So yes, we do an annual Thanksgiving giveaway, headed up by our very own Myron Daniels. And,
Deputy Chief Myron Daniels.
Deputy Chief, absolutely. Deputy Chief Myron Daniels. And so we partnered with all of the Divine Nine organizations in this city of Baton Rouge, and we give away, I believe, over 120 Thanksgiving full prep dinners to these families. And instead of us having them come to us, we go to them. And it's a unique experience because you're able not only to deliver these meals, but you're able to talk with some of these families, sometimes understanding some of the hardships that they're dealing with, but just creating that personal bond during the holiday season where some folk don't have family to even create that relationship with.
Sure.
It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen out there next to Benny's on North Street. Correct. All the food set up, the meals were completely prepared.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
we got Dina. What do you got going on over there?
Okay. One of the things that we didn't mention, right? We're talking about our aim to be involved in the community. So one of the things that we do in our chapter is we choose a citizen in Baton Rouge who we felt like somewhat displays the aims that we have consistent with Omega, right? And this year, our chapter chose you, Clay Young. I like to read this. The Lambda Kappa Kappa chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated presents to Clay Young our 2024 Citizen of the Year Award for unusual contributions to humanity and outstanding contributions to the welfare of mankind.
Yeah.
Brother Clay.
Why would you do that to me? I was wondering why Dina was floating back there in the shop.
Yes.
Wow.
We recognize the work that you're doing, brother. We want to let you know we appreciate you. We're proud of you.
All right.
We're here to support you, and we appreciate you having us and supporting us.
They got me real good. All right. Okay. Man, thank y'all. God bless y'all. I really do appreciate this.
We appreciate you.
All right, y'all. They got me really, really good. Y'all have a great weekend, and we'll catch you next week with a surprise guest. See you then.